Thank you. Would you let people know how it is that they can participate and introduce us to this webinar format?
All right, so we're using a technology called Zoom Webinar, which is a little bit different than Zoom Meeting. So the way the Zoom Webinar works is that the panelists, like Ledlie and Steve and Abigail and Tim, will be able to be seen and heard. But the attendees, meaning you'll be able to see Ledlie and Steve, but you won't be able to, you yourself will not be seen with a video or with audio. But if you have questions, there is a Q&A down at the bottom, a Q&A section where you can post your questions, and Karen and Amy are going to be curating those questions, and at the appropriate time, they will be giving those questions to the panelists to answer. So make sure that you use the Q&A. There is also a chat at the bottom, but we're not going to be using the chat. We're going to be using just the Q&A, and sit back and listen and get all this good information. And if you have questions, post those into the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and I appreciate your helping us get set up with this format. This is the first time that we've done a webinar with the parish. It's the first time we've gathered for a forum with the parish since we closed the buildings in mid-March. And I just want to outline what we anticipate doing this morning. Essentially, talking about what it is that we have been doing since we closed the buildings, and then what it is we are doing and where we think we're headed. And you'll be hearing from me and from Steve and Abigail and Tim, and we'll give you an overview. I think it probably makes the most sense, if you would, is just to hold your questions until the end, because I'd like to think that we will address them in the course of our remarks. And so we'll talk for a while, and then we're glad to be here and try to respond to any questions or concerns that you have that, as Ryan says, will go through Karen and Amy. Thank you for taking time in your day. And Steve's going to set the stage for us.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Ledlie. So welcome to our first ever virtual Rector and Wardens Forum. It is really an honor to hold a leadership role in a vibrant congregation such as this, but never more so than at a time like now, where we've seen just an unprecedented level of creativity and agility in response to an unprecedented crisis. The Holy Spirit is alive and well at St. Columba's, and I'm extremely proud at how this parish is responding to the complex environment in which we find ourselves. In a time of uncertainty, when many are suffering and all of us are anxious, it is comforting to find some measure of stability and continuity. On one level, COVID-19 is a public health crisis, and finding ways to protect those most at risk, to slow the spread, to treat the afflicted, and to develop a vaccine to prevent future infection are urgent priorities. But COVID-19 has done more than lay bare the vulnerabilities of our public health infrastructure. It's made even more stark the deep disparities and inequities in our society, where the age-adjusted infection rate in Ward 8 is nearly 4 times that in Ward 3, where the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19 in Ward 8 is 3.5 times the number in Ward 3. It may be that the virus doesn't respect boundaries, but those boundaries are remarkably significant in determining the pandemic's personal impact. And those are only the first order effects. The long-term impact of sudden unemployment and the economic dislocation it brings, potential loss of health coverage or homelessness, diminished education opportunities for children require focused and decisive effort to counteract, all at a time when local governments may find it difficult to sustain an adequate safety net in the absence of meaningful and compassionate federal action. So this is where, in the words of a familiar hymn, If we live into this moment, they will know that we are Christians by our love. As you know, we engaged in an extensive congregation-wide planning effort leading to the creation of a new strategic plan that is just a few months old. While there are many words in that plan, and I encourage you to read all of them, the shorthand or the mission is to live God's love. The slightly longer version consists of 4 strategic priorities that are meant to help us put that mission into action. Strengthen community, practice faith, embrace our world, and build capacity. During the past 6 weeks or so, the vestry and staff have been reflecting on that plan, wondering if the dramatic and unexpected events of the past 2 months have changed our thinking about any of those priorities. The short answer is that we believe that each remains as true today as it was before COVID-19, even if some of the ways that we'll put them into action may change. We believe that the power of a faith community to provide connection and comfort to its members and to serve as a catalyst for social justice has never been more important. As many of us have probably experienced in other organizations, one of the things that often impedes a new strategic plan in an organization that is otherwise doing well is a lack of urgency. Well, St. Columba's is fortunate to be doing well, and although we've been encouraged by how the congregation has embraced the call to action in the strategic plan, there's no doubt that COVID-19 has injected a new sense of urgency. Now our opportunity is to imagine not just how to replicate our physical world online, but how to view our new reality as a chance to do new things. The congregation and staff have rallied in ways that are really inspirational. And now Ledlie is going to discuss some of that, along with how our 4 strategic priorities are helping to shape our updated operating plans. Thanks. Ledlie?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the context. So let me say a little bit about what we have done since the middle of March, when we initially received word from our Bishop, Marianne Buddy, as did all churches in the diocese, that the buildings needed to close. And we naturally were responding there with safety as a top priority. And I gathered in the immediate aftermath of that with our staff leadership team, which consisted at the time of Amy and Joshua and Mally and Bronwyn and Karen. And it became clear to us right away that we wanted to prioritize our energies. And first up was to make sure that the people of St. Columba's had ways to stay connected to one another. Second was for us to continue to provide spiritual nourishment as we were able to literally seek to be feeding one another as the flock. And the other was, the third immediate thing was to increase our capacity for taking care of one another, for offering pastoral care, to reach out and be particularly attentive to those who may be vulnerable or struggling in some way. And in doing that, and it was not just staff that did this, many parishioners across the board, this quickly led us to shift the way we do worship, so that, as many of you know through your own participation, we've had the Great Hall style service that Amy and Amber have led the way on. And one of the things we thought there was that we wanted to say it was worship is, please worship at home. And so we wanted to show you worship at home. So rather than trying to stream that from the Great Hall, it was Amy at home and Amber at home. And then we also created the 11 o'clock service that many of you have been participating in and receiving as well. We explored different platforms. We also generated the Columba Daily Bread that goes out now each day, with special thanks to a handful of parishioners, I believe spearheaded by Alicia Brinkerhoff. A pandemic phone tree got put into place. We increased the number of check-in groups and small group opportunities to come together, as well as adding morning prayer, daily morning prayer, thanks to Joshua, and a Bible study with Joshua and with David. Some of the existing groups that many of you are part of opted to continue to meet and check in with one another. Some of you increasing those opportunities, like the meditation and frequent meetings of the mothers group, the now regular meetings of the fathers group, and so much more. Our water ministry continued to serve even as our building was closed. The planners and providers of meals and hospitality quickly moved everything outside, and we continued that for a number of weeks until the rules became stricter, primarily coming from Governor Hogan. And so we had to stop that, and we're now looking for different ways to pick it up again. To support a bunch of these changes, the staff had to make changes in what each of us is doing. And you've seen a bunch of that visibly online. As I think many of you know, behind the scenes, in order to generate this, we have been relying heavily on Bronwyn Roy and also on others in her team, Jamal Williams, who some of you might have known primarily as the person who operated the soundboard during Sunday worship. Jamal is the one editing and getting out the Columba Daily Bread. We proceeded as planned with the hiring of Lauren DeVito, who is Director of Creative, I always get the title wrong, Creative Director of Digital Media, I think is the right sequence of the words, and Barbara McGowan coordinating all of our efforts in there. We've also had some significant transitions in staff during these couple of months. We said farewell to Mally Lloyd as our interim associate. She had paved the way and helped Joshua Daniel arrive. As Joshua will tell you, between the time he left Arkansas in his U-Haul truck and the time he got to Washington, D.C., it was right in that window that the word came from the bishop that we needed to close the building. So Joshua and his family have moved in under challenging circumstances. It's been wonderful to welcome him. And welcoming Joshua and his capacity to connect gave me confidence that it was good for us to proceed as we had planned with bringing on board an additional staff member, a new position, our missioner for community engagement, and that's Cami Caudill, who began just a couple of weeks ago. And particularly in light of the context which Steve spelled out before, and bringing to the foreground our priority of embracing our world, it seems that now is a more important time than ever to have a lead person on our staff who is not only going to support our existing outreach and community engagement ministries and launch our new initiative in ending family homelessness, but also in real time explore with us how it is that we can be supporting those who are most vulnerable at this time. That's some of what I want to say about what we've done so far. I know, Abigail, you wanted to jump in at this,
Sure.
so please.
Thank you, Ledlie. Hello, everybody. Just on it's wonderful to be together. It is also as the mother of one of the seniors, it's just, I had to comment that it's a little unfair. I had to wipe the tears from my cheeks earlier, having watched the amazing service this morning that's recognizing all of the youth that are graduating this year. And I want to send a love and cheers out to all of them and all of you and the families that have brought them to this point. And I am excited at the future because of them. So that was wonderful. And I wanted to just reflect and appreciate for a moment before turning it back to Ledlie about how we do go forward. And in reflecting about everything that we've just heard from Steve and Ledlie about how we have effectively adapted, and I think it comes from all the work and love that has gone on at St. Columba's and the community that we are, and how we have looked to our role in the world. And this, we were able to adapt because of a high level of trust and effectiveness among the staff, and great relationships among them. The work that has gone into bringing together a wonderful group of leaders that we are really fortunate to have them, and that has paid dividends for us. I think one thing that this terrible crisis has done is created an even greater sense of purpose. We certainly have, as a Christian community, a great sense of purpose. And I think this has, as Steve said, brought urgency to it. And it has, I think, the 2 years worth of discussing and coming together on our vision, and the hundreds and thousands of points of feedback and input into our plan is paying off now, because we are very clear about what our future will bring, what we want our future to bring. And then many organizations, and I'm so, as Steve said, so inspired by how quickly we experimented and the staff experimented, and we all did. And we have things that we will bring forward into the future that we will be better as a result. Daily bread is something that has sustained us all, I know. And I wanted to thank, so these are things that I think are making us able to lean into this future as it's revealed to us. And I know that we are all so grateful for all the work of parishioners, all of you who are helping us stay connected, who are participating in leading the youth, who are any number of things that Ledlie has just mentioned. And so I want to thank all of you. You all have sustained, I know, the staff and Ledlie and Steve and me and Tim and the whole vestry. I know, as I have reached out as part of the vestry team that is making connections by phone, as is often the case, as I try to minister to other, I am more ministered to, and those phone calls have been wonderful. And those connections are sustaining us all. And so I want to thank you all for the work that you are doing and the work we will do together going forward. And then in particular, just a heartfelt sense of gratitude and appreciation and inspiration to the entire staff across St. Columba's, who are doing new things and adapting and working odd hours and helping us adapt to this unknown future. Just a heartfelt thank you to all of you. And we are with you, and we are all with each other. And it is inspiring to consider how this organization and this wonderful community is really saying yes to the future. Ledlie?
Thank you, Abigail. So let me say a little bit about what we're doing and what we're envisioning going forward. And I think to summarize it most succinctly is to say that as with other organizations, we will be reopening, as it were, in phases. We don't see that us going back to normal. And so in reopening, we're anticipating adjusting our plans so that church is blended. Let me say a little bit about each of those things. Reopening in phases. So as we all know, the governors of Maryland and Virginia and the mayor of DC are in regular conversation with one another and with other leaders around the country, but and are adjusting their plans, particularly around greater metropolitan DC, and letting us know when it's safe to do what. And in the same spirit of coordination and collaboration, our bishop, Marian Buddy, has coordinated with the bishops of the Diocese of Maryland and Virginia, so that they issued, and we sent out to you, I commend it to you, a statement on how they are going to be also tracking when it is safe or perceived to be safe for us to be gathering in progressively larger groups, beginning with small groups. The Bishop Buddy has been clear that she has not set any dates as to when we will go from one phase to the next. Rather, it will be driven by data and the leaders of St. Columba's and every parish in the diocese. Before taking next steps, we'll need to have put together a plan and submit those to her in advance so that she can just keep track of what's going on. So that's like the rest of the country, the rest of the world, we're anticipating progressing in phases. At the same time, it's very clear that we're not going back. We're not going back to normal. And I don't know if you've seen, I've seen plenty of articles that would say that large gatherings in churches or halls is going to come a lot later rather than a lot sooner. I think even if all the restrictions were lifted tomorrow, a vast number of us would say, I'm not going back to church right now. It's not until, I don't know, not until there's a widely administered vaccine. And I think we simply, we won't want to right away, even if we can. Of course, there's a part of our heart that wants to so much. And I also, it seems to me that if it is, I don't know how long it's going to be until we have a vaccine. Nobody knows. But let's, for the sake of argument, say it's 18 months. If we're talking about 16 or 18 months from now, our whole patterns of how we are as a community will have gone through some shifts, as well as all the patterns in our larger society. Which means that we need at the same time to be holding, we need to be acknowledging as a congregation the deep sense of loss, both the short term, as that great exuberant bustle of being at St. Columba's on a Sunday morning, with all of you and us coming and going, and never quite knowing just what you're going to experience and how it's going to turn out. And that's even as one that's planning it. That's one of the losses. and at the same time, a sense, and I think Steve referenced this, there is a sense of summons now that we're called to be the church in some new way. And we don't know just what that is. And no one knows just what that is, but that we are going to embrace that and walk forward into the wilderness, putting all our trust in God's guiding spirit. And as our youth preacher, Iomi Wolf, spoke about this morning, going forward, not knowing, and knowing that the Spirit is going to be with us. And as the three bishops who wrote the statement said, and I quote, "The way forward is also the road of our own transformation in the midst of a societal transformation that we can help shape by our faithfulness to the God of resurrection and hope. God is calling forth from us now far more than we could have asked for or imagined just a few months ago. If we choose to embrace this moment and learn all that we can from it, we will emerge as a stronger church with greater capacity for faithful and fruitful ministry when this season passes." It is, of course, the defining truth of Christianity that Easter is the defining truth of Christianity, and that we are a people who go from crucifixion to resurrection, from grief to hope, from death to new life. And so together we'll hang on to that and lean into that. So blended is a term that's being used certainly in schools, meaning that creating opportunities both to gather in person on the property, on campus, if you will, as well as virtually, digitally, online. And we're looking at how we can do that. And what we'll be doing during the course of the summer is looking at in a pretty granular way at each and all of our ministries. I know that some of you that there are various prayer circles or or other support groups that used to meet in person and have been meeting virtually and are finding that that works pretty well for you. There are other ministries, the choir, the sacristans come to mind, that without meeting physically and in person, it's really nigh on impossible. But maybe there will be ways. We are, as Abigail said, we imagine going forward, even when we can gather in physically, that we'll continue some things like the daily bread. That's reaching. We suddenly have a much greater reach, as do most churches, but they're figuring out how to go online. I was thinking, with all those seniors heading off to college, we can just go with you because we're now available, some of the St. Columba's experience, wherever you go. But we'll be looking at all of these different aspects. I will also say, and I'm not going to get into details on this, but certainly the St. Columba's Nursery School is looking at the implications there, our leadership there, as to how we're going to carry forward with that. So that assessing and planning, let me look at my notes. But we're designing some, Joshua's cooking up some ideas about when we can begin to gather and are comfortable gathering in smaller groups. Maybe we'll go back to an ancient first century model of house churches. And maybe we'll have backyard church this summer, where, if you've got a few households that you're happy to gather with in a small group and permission is granted by the powers that be, we'll begin having little communities gathered. It is very much on my heart and the heart and mind of leaders as to how we address the sacramental life, which is, of course, the essence of our life as Episcopalians. I will also say that as we do this assessing, we'll be looking for completely new opportunities. There may be things that either the needs of the world or the opportunities of using social media will open for us paths that weren't important or weren't available to us before. I will also say, and we're not all that good at this at St. Columba's, but we can't do it all. And our staff is doing an extraordinary job, and we can't simply add on. So we have oceans of good ideas, and we're going to hear more, and we're eager to hear more, and we're going to have to balance that out. One of the things that I'm aware of, and that I'm going to stop here, is that in order to create Sunday worship now, we're doing that primarily relying on a handful of staff. And before COVID, on any given Sunday, I would estimate there were nearly 100 different members of the congregation who were participating one way or another, from ushers to altar guild and flower guild and choir members. And in a sense, the staff took a lot of church back, and that's not a model of what the church is. So we need to now hand it back out. And I don't know quite how we do that, but that's an energy, a direction that feels important to me. And I recognize, because I'm hearing from you, that many of you are exercising your gifts as followers of Jesus and finding ways to do that at home and at work and in school and in your life. Many of you are looking for new ways that you might do that. And that's an essential piece of what we're all about as a congregation, live God's love. That's not something we just do institutionally. That's something that we do individually and in all of our communities, is live God's love. So we're going to continue to find the ways and to be about doing that. Let me stop there. Steve, I think you've seen some opportunities ahead.
Well, and I just, Ledlie, want to thank you and the staff for all that you've done to sustain this institution and this community during a very challenging time. But, our call is just way too important to stop. It requires that we adapt. And Ledlie sent us all an article, the folks on this call, an article a week or so ago from a group that does a lot of consulting work with nonprofits, highlighting that really all organizations, whether they like it or not, are back in startup mode. And what worked before may not work well now, but what might have not been possible before could actually be very powerful and timely today. Figuring out what that looks like requires experimentation. But if there is a silver lining at all in a time like this, it's that we have an open window for that experimentation and a chance to take some creative risks that we might have found uncomfortable a couple of months ago. Ledlie's talked about some of those experiments, and it's been really affirming to see the congregation's willingness to try new things. Some will work, and they'll carry us forward, and others won't, and we'll take lessons learned from that. But thank you for your openness to those experiments and experiences and to being part of this intentional effort to reimagine how we live God's love together. Just want to share one brief story. About a week ago, Ledlie assembled a small group from among the congregation, along with 2 representatives from the diocese, just to brainstorm how we do more today than just replicate our physical expression of St. Columba's. And for me, it was a really interesting opportunity to consider how some of the new technologies that we're adopting in crisis mode might actually help us to advance the mission of the church in ways that we hadn't previously imagined. Just to take, a simple example, something that we're probably all familiar with, is to think about how a digital retailer like Amazon.com has been able to achieve a level of understanding of its customers, innovation in logistics, a level of ubiquity that was beyond most bricks and mortar stores. Amazon isn't just there when I call on them. Frighteningly, actually, they sort of anticipate what I might want to read or when I need laundry detergent. Now, all of us on this call looks forward to the day when we can safely resume large group worship. But we also need to acknowledge that we're probably serving some of our members better today than we were previously. We've heard from some folks that hadn't been able to attend physically, either because of mobility issues or because they've relocated or because of scheduling conflicts, that they're able to really appreciate and participate in various digital offerings that we have today and that present an opportunity for us to build on. We've also started a conversation about ways in which we can harness some of these tools to more deeply engage among ourselves, but also to reach and engage new audiences, not just to consume online content, although there are some great resources available now, and not just for formal worship, but to anticipate the needs of our members in our community and to catalyze direct action that can help us emerge from this crisis, not by getting back to normal, but by rebuilding our social fabric and social contract in ways that are more just and more inclusive, by creating not a new normal, but a better normal. As you may know, the Cathedral has been offering a daily meditation delivered each day by email. And in today's, Dean Randy Hollerith reminds us that God's love is our superpower. He writes, "During these pandemic days of uncertainty and chaos, loss and pain, our calling is to live knowing that we are not orphaned, that we are loved deeply by God. This truth frees us to love others radically and to be part of the healing and redeeming work this world desperately needs." Your vestry, your clergy, and your staff fully intend to seize this opportunity to continue that experimentation and hope that we can adopt new ways of being the church that help make St. Columba's an even more potent force for good in the world. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our treasurer, Tim Massad, who will talk about what your continuing generosity has enabled and how it's guiding our thinking about the budget for our new fiscal year starting July 1st.
Thank you, Steve. I want to do 3 things. I want to first give you a quick snapshot of our current financial condition. Then I want to explain how the pandemic is affecting us financially. And then third, I will say a few words about how we're thinking about the budget for the next fiscal year, which begins July 1. So first, our current financial condition. For the 9 months of our fiscal year ended March 31st, in other words, from July 1, 2019 until March 31st of this year, which represents 75% of the year, our contributions were slightly below budget. Our contributions were 69% of our budget. However, we've also kept our expenses in check, and those were at about 62% of our budget. So we're doing okay. Now, we're going to post those 9-month financials on the website later this week, so you can see all that in more detail. Second, let me talk about the effects of the pandemic specifically. So on the revenue side, most of our revenues come from pledges, and when we are closed, we can't pass the plate, and that hurts. But we have received more online contributions, and many parishioners have set up regular electronic contributions, either on a weekly or a monthly basis, and that is extremely helpful. So when we look at the period from early March until today, our overall collections are pretty close to last year, to where we were last year. However, the number of contributors has fallen. Now, we were able to make that up for this period because we received large contributions from a few parishioners who were able to make larger contributions. And so that made up for the decline from others. So we don't know whether that will continue. I want to first thank everyone who's contributed. Your support, even in this time when we cannot come to church, is obviously critical. And I especially want to thank those who have increased their support. On the expense side, most of our expenses are for personnel, and we have kept everyone on staff because without our staff, we obviously cannot carry out our mission. And as Ledlie explained, people are adapting and retooling what they do as needed. Our second biggest category of expenses is operating the building. And because we have been closed, we have had some savings there, particularly in our utility costs of about $10,000 a month. Let me turn to how we're thinking about the budget. And this is for the fiscal year that will begin July 1st. So as you've heard from Ledlie and Steve and Abigail, we want to continue to pursue our mission to the fullest extent possible. We are not thinking of this as a time to, reduce operations and wait out the pandemic until we can get back to normal. But rather, how do we evolve? How do we adapt to fulfill our strategic priorities we've established? And how do we meet the challenges of this time and seize the opportunities? And as Ledlie and Steve have said, it means doing some new things. And one of the most critical will be upgrading our digital and streaming capabilities. We need to do this not simply because we will be closed for some period of time, and we're trying to make some assumptions about that as we put together the budget, but obviously we don't know how long we'll be closed. But even once we reopen, as Ledlie was saying, we expect that there will be some parishioners who may be reluctant to attend, or we may have to have smaller gatherings. And so we will need this enhanced capability. We don't know the cost yet. We are currently researching that. We hope to fund that capital cost in the current fiscal year, in part from the savings that we've had. We also hope that there will be parishioners who can consider making a special contribution to fund this, given that it will be so critical and it is unexpected. This will add some operating cost in the upcoming fiscal year, and we're also working on estimating that. There may be some other new costs as well. We're assuming we may have to purchase PPE for the time when we reopen. We may need deep cleaning occasionally. So we're trying to figure that out. But at the same time, we're examining every single expense line to determine where we can save money. And there are a number of areas where we can make some modest savings. In addition to utility costs, if we are closed, we can reduce travel expenses. We do expect to reduce what we call hospitality expenses, which are the costs of large gatherings, since we won't be having those. And unfortunately, serving donuts, we won't be serving as many donuts. Printing fewer bulletins. And frankly, we are even looking at small expense lines like communion wafers and wine. I mean, we're not happy that we can't administer a sacrament, but we'll save a little money. Flowers, visiting musicians, and so forth. Every dollar that we can save helps. But as I said, most of our costs are personnel and operating the physical plant. So we don't expect to reduce overall costs dramatically. We were able to obtain a loan under the government small business program, the PPP program. That is for the church and the school. And that will help us close any gap in the short term. Let me just conclude by again thanking you for your contributions, and with your continued support, we can adapt and seize the opportunities that we have. And we know the pandemic affects different people differently. Some people are facing hardship or anxiety about their personal circumstances, and we recognize that some people may have difficulty contributing what they have in the past. And we just hope that you will still participate to the fullest extent that you can. For others, the pandemic may mean that we face anxiety about the state of the world, but not personal financial hardship. And because we are a community, and all of us know that hard times can strike any of us, we hope that those who are able to increase their support will do so. The extent to which those of us who can step up will be critical to the ability of our community as a whole to deal with the pandemic and to continue to pursue our mission. As I noted, in particular, it's very helpful to get regular electronic contributions. We encourage everyone who can do so to do that. You can find out more about that on the website, columba.org, or feel free to contact Karen Sprague. And please also consider including St. Columba's if you are doing any estate planning, as that can help fund our ministry for future generations, and Bronwyn can help you with that. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to just check in just a moment with Karen and Amy if you have questions. And we are eager to the extent that we're able, answer any questions that you may have for us about our ministry. And I see you're on mute, but thank you for.
So Ledlie, we have one question. It says, St. C's is a large congregation. Are there additional investments we can pilot and demonstrate for other churches? For example, special protective equipment for staff, automatic temperature screening technology at the door, similar to what airports have installed, and special protective spaces and barriers for people who have suppressed immune systems.
Karen, could you just repeat the beginning portion of that question?
It says, since St. C's is a large congregation, are there additional investments we can pilot and demonstrate for other churches?
Good, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that question, and that's the kind of thing that we are looking at. I will say that our operations manager, Tony Cottrell, is working on just that kind of planning, and he also, using available material, is working with others to have a he's thinking in phases as well. But yes, I don't know yet which of the possible things we will opt to do, depending upon, I presume, fairly straightforward cost and benefit analysis. And we will be looking at ways that we can be coordinating with other congregations as well, not only in this area, but in a host of areas.
Great. We have another question. To be consistent with the teachings and certificates of safeguarding God's children, how are we keeping kids safe with the proliferation of tech use? And how are we thinking about the developmental differences for kids aged 3 to 10 when it comes to 2D versus 3D learning and engagement? I'm concerned kids may suffer developmentally if both school and church go heavily Zoom focused. So I think I have some thoughts on that because we've talked about that. Yeah, so the hope is that Katie McGurvey and I have already been talking about equipping parents to be the primary teachers of faith and family. And actually we had that conversation in a larger staff meeting. So our goal later this summer is to have a parenting book group where we equip ourselves as parents to be the primary teachers of faith in our home. So we appreciate that and want to make it more interactive at home. And Wednesday night, Katie has already started practicing this and has been piloting parents sort of a kit of sorts, like here's a scavenger hunt, here's a video, parents, you take your kids out and do this thing. And so for about the past month, the technology has been given as a tool to then use as a in-person, real-time family event. So we are thinking about the life stages, and we're definitely trying to do some more balance.
Thank you.
Tim, this question is for you.
Sure.
We are keeping the staff intact. Will the PPP loan convert to a grant?
That's a good question. We will make that decision at a future date. I guess I will say this about that. We when we applied for and received the loan, we were consistent with both the letter and spirit of it in terms of how it what it was for. And you know, there's been a lot of talk about the program and who should be entitled to it and so forth. So in terms of whether we seek the forgiveness, we just want to make sure that when we get to the point of making that decision, that we continue to be consistent with the letter and spirit. And so we'll evaluate that later.
Okay, there's another question about staffing. It says, are the contract housekeeping staff continuing to receive their wages? I'm happy to answer that if you'd like, or you can.
Please go ahead.
We do have a contract with the housekeeping company, and we did have two contractors on it. One of them has been reassigned to another job that they needed personnel for, so they're continuing to be paid, and one of them is still on our contract and is being paid.
I think, Karen, it was our intention that at least through this time, all staff are being paid at the same level that they were being paid prior to the closing of the building.
Okay. Next question is, what can you tell us about the status of the search for a youth minister? So May 28th, we will have a slate of final candidates to review. The search team has been in place, and we had our orientation a few weeks ago. And so Ministry Architects has spent the past month interviewing, doing background checks, checking references, and so that is moving on ahead as planned.
Okay, we have a question. Because the summer may be a time with little activity, no camp or vacations, will St. C's continue to offer online courses and activities to come together and learn?
Yes, we don't have a full summer lineup at the moment yet, but I believe, but yes, and you know, in a sense, this is something we've looked at before. In a sense, we wind down our programming stuff. Essentially, that St. Columba's, as many churches, has sort of followed an academic calendar as much as a liturgical calendar. And by simplifying things in the summer, since I'm imagining that most of you aren't headed off to a whole lot of summer vacation, there's every reason to think that it makes sense for us to continue to provide opportunities. Having said that, I just want to quickly get in as well, though, that I'm eager to make sure that that your clergy and staff do observe vacation, even if it means they're just going to go camp out in their backyard.
Yes. Question: what is happening with Mitch?
Mitch is employed. I think we covered that in the previous question. Mitch is not had to do as much. But maybe Karen, I don't know. I'm not aware that he is having to do as much. I know he checks in on the property periodically. And as some of you know, due to a severe windstorm, we had damage done to the steeple. Thanks to Tony and Karen, we've gotten the insurance lined up and the repair work is underway on that. Mitch is helping coordinate, for instance, with contractors arriving to do that. And it is also anticipated that at some point when it appears that our opportunity to regather, even just for small groups or maybe just periodically for staff, when that appears to be on the horizon, Tony is planning for a significant deep cleaning of all the property. Of course, any kind of reopening, while we may be using the building less, we're going to be paying greater attention to keeping it safe and clean.
So we have some questions that came in on the chat box. And so just a reminder that we have a Q&A box. And so if you could put your questions in the Q&A box, that'd be great. But from the chat, we have two. So Karen, I'll take the first, you take the second. Is St. Columba's thinking about how to assist older parishioners who may not be able to attend church in person, how they can connect through technology, i.e. loaner computer devices or et cetera?
We are thinking about that. I will say, so I made reference before to early on setting up a phone tree, and the phone tree has been designed most intentionally to reach out to folks who were born in 1945 or before, and then that was the initial group of folks that were being called, and then it's greatly expanded in the intervening weeks since then. So we're calling many more people. But if I think the best way to deal with that, to address that, is on an individual basis. So if you know somebody who is having trouble connecting with St. Columba's because of technology needs, please let me know. I know that Jennifer Turner, our Minister for Member Engagement, has been doing quite a lot of fielding quite a few questions. We have people who can help you be connected. So the answer, I guess the shorter answer would have simply been yes.
Okay, I have a question. Is there thinking about how to build an outdoor amphitheater or buy and arrange chairs so we can do some service outdoors when weather permits? I miss everybody. Would be great to worship together safely outside.
So that is absolutely. So the short answer to that question is yes, we're going to look at that. Again, looking at options and putting them out on the table. Potentially gathering in the courtyard could make sense. We have had talk in the past about redesigning the front lawn on the corner of 42nd and Albemarle. Those of us that went to the Holy Land saw a wonderful outdoor gathering worship area at a church we visited. I can imagine doing something like that on that lawn. And just for scale, I was surprised to learn that lawn on the corner is a little bit larger than our Great Hall. So we could actually have some, so yes.
Maddie, thank you for the suggestion. We'll take that to heart, and I'm going to move on to our next question. Can you provide an example of what a small group gathering at church might look like?
A small group gathering at church? Yes. So let's for the, I'm assuming that I'll have to put some, well, you've asked me to imagine, so yes, I can imagine. If we're going to maintain 6 foot distance, from one another, and then imagining that there may be a maximum number of people that are allowed to gather. For instance, the bishop's letter made reference to potentially groups of not more than 10 or not more than 20, depending upon that group. So let's say it's a bunch of the youth, or let's say it's a meditation group, or let's say it's a meeting of the finance committee. They could, it may be that that group needs to meet in a slightly larger space, a larger room than they would under pre-COVID contexts have met. Or related to that previous question, maybe we'll have a tent set up outside so that meetings can take place with greater airflow. That's the kind of, and of course we'd have a limited number of groups coming through. We're receiving some, I'm aware that, you may or may not know that there are many 12-step groups that regularly meet at St. Columba's and other churches across the region as well. But that's they'd love to be able to regather sooner rather than later.
Tim, I have a question for you. The nursery school contributes a significant amount to the church budget as it pays for its use of space. Loss of that revenue would be a big hit to the budget. Is it assumed in our budget planning that the school will not be able to open?
Well, at this time, we're assuming the school will open, but we're in close contact with the school, of course. The treasurer of the school is on the finance committee. The finance committee meets tomorrow evening. I would just say that, whatever budget we adopt, because we do need to adopt a budget in the next month or so, there are a lot of uncertainties. We don't know when the church will reopen, and those affect the budget. So we will also be looking at different contingencies, different scenarios, in addition to adopting a budget, so that we can plan and be ready in case circumstances are not as we've assumed in the budget that we adopt.
Another comment, I agree with the comment about outdoor and small group activities and worship. I appreciate all the adapting to online formats, but I don't want to lose sight of in-person gatherings either inside or outside, and would appreciate further updates on the specific ideas and activities underway to make that happen consistent with local law. Nothing can replace that. Thank you for all your work on this. And another quick question is, can we get somebody to design a line of St. C's masks?
I bet we can.
I think
And, maybe whoever asked the question would like to look into that. So back to you. My screen says that there are chats and Q&As. I'm not seeing them, but I don't know that they are. You may have already fielded them.
No, there's two more questions. Karen, do you want to take the next one, or shall I?
It's early, of course, but what options are in discussion for keeping St. C's magnificent choirs engaged? Are other churches in the diocese providing ideas as well?
I don't actually have an answer to that, and I'm afraid Ann Tim Payne is not available because we don't have her on board as a panelist here.
Could I make one comment, Ledlie?
Please, Steve. Maybe you're aware as a
just a little bit. So I sing in the choir, the adult choir, and I just want to offer a quick shout out for both Diane and Anne, who I think have done a remarkable job in sort of two ways. One is maintaining this community that exists among the choirs, youth choirs as well as the adult choirs, but also to the question that came earlier about engaging people with different levels of technology proficiency. Anne in particular, I know, has done a number of one-on-one workshops with members of the choir to help get folks comfortable with technology so that we could gather. And we've been gathering, at least as the adult choir, on a weekly basis on Thursday nights. So that does continue. In terms of music making, it's been a bit more limited, but there have been some opportunities for groups to participate. So we're continuing to discuss ways to do that. But I wanted to make sure that we recognize both Diane and Anne, who have really done some remarkable work in adverse circumstances.
We got a suggestion about the mask, and I love it. Wear God's love. Just putting it out there. All right. Another question. Does the fact that we are not using the building present an opportunity to address issues related to the fabric if we could raise the money?
I expect it does. I will tell you, and we have a, and both Steve and Karen serve as part of our strategic plan, and I'm blanking on the name of that task force that we could put together, but
the master plan task force.
A master planning task force to look not only at how we care for the building and maintain it, but how we think about what its needs will be going forward. All I can say really is that we're looking at that. I don't know, Karen, if you'd say otherwise. There aren't, well, I suppose if we, actually, I should back off of that. I am aware that when the time comes that we have a capital campaign and we raise $1 million plus to be able to redo the interior of the nave, and I just made $1 million up out of my head, so don't quote me on that, but to redo the interior of the nave, including proper care of the windows and redoing the lighting and the sound system, and then follow that with plaster and paint job. That's going to be a nightmare when it happens because we're all going to have to get out of the building. Maybe this is what the questioner was leading me to. Well, since we're already out of the building, isn't this a really good time to redo the nave? The answer to that would be yes. So if you, I should check with Bronwyn, but if you want to put some big bucks down on the table or lead the way with a challenge grant, this would actually be a fabulous time to get our nave shipshape.
We have our last question. Karen, you want to read this one?
Sure. It says, you all are doing a wonderful job as nimble, kind, loving ministers and caring people, and we so appreciate it. What can we do to make your jobs easier and care for you as well?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the heart behind the question. I think Abigail said earlier, you know, one of the things that really has helped the staff respond the way we have is that everything that we have heard from you in the congregation has been expressions of appreciation and gratitude. And that has strengthened us. I know that Joshua, as a brand, you know, with his young family arriving here, the mothers group has been feeding them. I know somebody's sending them plant cuttings. I don't know, keep sending the love. Amy, Karen, you got other ideas?
I am grateful that we threw a lot of stuff on the table, not knowing what would work or what would fit. And no one sent me notes of like, you could have done this 10 times better. It was just allowing us to try things and even to fail occasionally. That grace is huge. Please keep it coming. We'll keep trying, but it's been great to know that you guys would catch us if we foul. So thank you for that.
I ditto that. The support has been wonderful.
There's no more questions.
Well, thank you for taking this time to be with us. I want to close us out with a prayer, and this is from our Easter liturgy, a great prayer of the Book of Common Prayer. The Lord be with you. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And now may the blessing of God Almighty, Creator, Redeemer, and Sanctifier be upon you and among you and those whom you love this day and always.
Amen.
Amen.
Let us go forth rejoicing in the power of the Spirit. Alleluia. Alleluia.
Thanks be to God.
God. Alleluia. Alleluia.
And we're all going to sign off. And Karen's going to figure out how to get this recording available for others.
Thank you.
Thank you.